Oh, the deep, deep love of Jesus, vast, unmeasured, boundless, free, rolling as a mighty ocean in its fullness over me. Underneath me, all around me, is the current of thy love, leading onward, leading homeward to thy glorious rest above. Oh, the deep, deep love of Jesus, vast, unmeasured, boundless, free, and it lifts me up to glory, for it lifts me up to thee.
Peter, the Magnificent. One of the most fascinating members of Jesus' cabinet was Simon Peter. He was very valiant, for he was a fearless disciple. Only a brave man will jeopardize his secure job and throw himself into a new and different life. Yet Peter did this exact thing. Remember the violent storm of the Galilean Sea when Jesus appeared on the water? Peter cried out, "Lord, if it is you, bid me to come to you on the water." Jesus replied, "Come." Peter plunged right in. He was willing to do anything Jesus told him. He was a real man, a man's man, rough, rugged, and ready for any necessary action to further Christ's cause. To the word valiant, one must add the word vacillating or changeable. He was prone to leap before looking. He went from one extreme to the other. Peter said he would never deny Christ when Jesus warned the disciples about falling away. The next day, Jesus was arrested, and, as predicted, the disciples began to fall away. It was Peter who denied Christ 3 times. In that moment, Peter's heart was shattered and awakened. He was very dissatisfied with himself, but his story doesn't end there. The last word describes him as victorious. No matter how many times he failed, he got up and tried again. Peter's first step came on Easter Sunday morning when the news arrived that Christ arose. The angel spoke to the woman at the tomb and said, "Christ is risen. Go tell his disciples and Peter." This really thrilled Peter that Jesus had explicitly called him by name. It was as if Jesus said, "Peter, I forgive you." Peter really recommitted his all to Christ. Then when Peter was asked by Christ, "Do you love me more than these earthly things?" he replied each time, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." In each of the 3 instances, Jesus said, "Then tend my sheep." It was a direct call for Peter to preach Christ's truths. At Pentecost, he preached with such power and fervor that he led 3,000 souls to Christ. He became a solid rock, a powerful instrument through Christ Jesus. We have all failed, but we all have got up, and with more determination as Peter did, decided to serve Christ completely as Peter did, for his life shows that this is the only way to live the victorious life.
I have journeyed through the long dark night, out on the open sea. By faith alone, sight unknown, and yet his eyes were watching me. The anchor holds, though the ship is battered. The anchor holds, though the sails are torn. I have fallen on my knees as I face the raging sea. The anchor holds in spite of the storm. Yes, I have fallen on my knees as I face those raging seas. The anchor holds in spite of the storm.
James the Lesser. James, the son of Alphaeus, was the least mentioned of all Jesus' disciples. Yet he was always there among Jesus and his fellow disciples. He was sometimes called James the Lesser. By this we know he was a short or small in stature man. But Jesus chose him regardless of his size. That's true today. How many times has God used a child for his work instead of an adult? Jesus denies any relation between a man's size and his ability to achieve. James, no doubt, did not appreciate being called the lesser. But though he may have been small physically, he was a big man otherwise. For remember, Jesus called him. James's parents brought him up properly, even though they were disappointed when Matthew, his brother, became a tax collector. But they remembered God's promise. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And eventually, both James and Matthew became Christ's disciples. Finally, James is like the quiet, unassuming people whose unknown contributions and prayers have been the backbone of your church. These people sometimes go unnoticed here, but in heaven they will receive the reward. Who knows how many people have fasted, prayed, or carried others' burdens, or made unknown contributions today? Only God knows. And just like James the Lesser, he'll reward you and ask you to be one of his.
Jesus, keep me from all wrong.
Simon the Zealot. Simon is known mainly by the adjective following his name, the Zealot. Simon was a member of the Zealots, an organization that wished to overthrow the government. The ideals at first were for the freedom of the people, but in Simon's pursuit, he fell under the influence of a few radicals who used their ideals to justify themselves. Simon at one time was a Jewish patriarch, but he became a rebel and a fanatic. Somewhere along the line, he realized that the Zealots could not satisfy his heart's desire for freedom. But then he met someone who satisfied him entirely, Jesus. But that wasn't the greatest miracle. The greater miracle was that Jesus chose him even though he was a radical. The transformation Christ worked in his life made Simon the Zealot a wonderfully new person. He was still zealous, but now he really had a cause for which to stand. Many young people today are still looking for a real cause for which to live. However, riots and demonstrations do not give satisfaction, but Christ's cause does forever. The years passed quickly as Simon lived wholeheartedly for Jesus. Does this disciple's life contain a message for today? It's wonderful that Christ could pick up a rebellious radical and make life of such reputation to be among one of his select circle of friends. Surely there must be a place in his kingdom for every one of us.
You're the God of the city. You're the King of his people. You're the Lord of the nation. You are. You're the light in the darkness. You're the hope to the hopeless. You're the peace to the restless. You are. There is no one like our God. There is no one like our God. Greater things are yet to come, and greater things are still to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to come, and greater things are still to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to come, and greater things are still to be done in this city. Greater things have yet to come, and greater things are still to be done here.
Doubting Thomas. Thomas was a follower of Jesus who had to be shown everything before he believes. No wonder people called him Doubting Thomas. Since we live in a practical, scientific, show-me world, we all should be quite comfortable with Thomas. Thomas viewed the dark side of every situation. He sounds like the pessimist running around today. But Thomas was a good man. It's easy to look at the bad traits in a person and overlook the good traits. Yes, he was one of the most dedicated workers of Christ, and yet his doubt was real and honest. It was not the hardness or unbelief of indifference, but an honest quest for truth. The announcement of Christ's resurrection caused the greatest doubt Thomas had ever had. He truly wanted to believe, but he needed to see Christ for himself. When Jesus finally appeared to him, Thomas fell to his knees and exclaimed, "My Lord and my God." Seeing was enough. His belief was real at last. Jesus continued to guide and light Thomas's pathway. Thomas courageously followed step by step. He moved from uncertainty to certainty, We as a church and individuals can learn a lot from Thomas. His life depicts an object lesson on how to achieve faith. He shows that the real test of faith is an open mind and heart. He didn't understand and believe everything at first, but he gradually learned to trust God for everything. Did you ever notice that Jesus never scolded Thomas for his doubts? He knew that questioning leads to discovery and maturity. Jesus respected Thomas's honest quest for truth and his quality of love. We can all learn and identify with Thomas. Don't be ashamed of your doubts, but let them develop into wisdom and commitment to Christ. Trust Jesus, and he will gradually lead you into life at its fullest. A life filled with God and his wonderful love.
With 2 fishes and 5 loaves you fed 5,000. And I saw you restore a withered hand. And I saw you raise up Lazarus. And I saw what you wrote in the sand. But I also saw you dying there on Calvary. And I saw it when they pierced you in your side. And I would not believe in your name till I had seen with mine own eyes. And I believe in heaven, and I believe in hell, and I believe you rose again, and I believe in the Son of God and his love.
Jesus Christ. Isaiah wrote 700 years prior to the birth of Christ, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." These words attempt to describe the one to whom all the world will someday bow. As he looks at each individual, one cannot but help to remember his words. "Greater love have no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do whatever I command you." But wait, what made this man so very different? He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30, and then, for 3 years, he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompanies greatness. He had no credentials but himself. What then made him so great? Was it the miracles he performed? Healing the sick? Raising the dead, giving sight to the blind? Are these the things that made him great? No, his greatness came from one divine fact. He, Jesus Christ, was the only begotten Son of God.
How beautiful the hands that served the wine and the bread, and the sons of the earth. How beautiful the feet that walked
take this bread. It is the flesh of me, and take this wine. It is my blood. For the day is soon that I'll be gone. The day is soon that you will be alone, when I will not be here with you to speak. But I'll leave to you the Holy Comforter, and this bread and wine in remembrance of me. One of you he will 3 times deny that he knows the Son of Man. And one of you he will betray me for 30 pieces of silver with a kiss.
Judas. After betraying Jesus, Judas was so full of remorse that he went out and hanged himself. Jesus. Tried by the Jews and convicted by the Roman governor, Jesus was crucified, buried, and rose again in 3 days. James. Beheaded by King Herod in Jerusalem. Andrew. Bound to a cross in the shape of an X, he preached to his persecutors until he died. Peter. Crucified in Rome with his head downward. Philip. crucified head downward in Areopolis, near Laodicea. Matthew. Slain with a sword in Ethiopia. Nathaniel Bartholomew. Flayed alive. Thomas. Run through with a lance, a Coromandel, in the East Indies. James the Lesser. Thrown down a lofty pinnacle of the temple and beaten to death with a club. Thaddeus. Shot to death with arrows. Simon the Zealot. Preached the gospel in North Africa and was martyred in Palestine. John. Put in a cauldron of boiling oil, but escaped in a miraculous manner. Afterwards banished to the island of Patmos, where he was given the vision of the revelation.
Are barred and all the windows fastened down. I spent the night in sleeplessness and rose at every sound, half in hopeless sorrow and half in fear the day would find the soldiers breaking through and tear us all away.
And just before the sunrise, I heard something at the wall. The gate began to rattle and a voice began to call. I hurried to the window, looked down into the street, expecting swords and torches and the sound of soldiers' feet.
There was no one there but Mary, so I went down to let her in. John stood there beside me as she told me where she'd been? She said, they moved him in the night, none of us knows where.
The stone's been rolled away and now his body isn't there. We all went to the garden, then John ran on ahead. We found the stone in an empty tomb, just the way that Mary said.
But the winding sheet they wrapped him in was just an empty shell.
How or where they'd taken him was more than we could tell. Well, something strange had happened there, but what we did not know.
John believed a miracle, but I just turned to go.
Circumstance and speculation couldn't lift him very high.
'Cause we'd seen them crucify him, and then we saw him die.
Back inside the house again, the guilt and anguish came. Everything I promised him had added to my shame. When at last it came to choices, I denied I knew his name.
Even if he was alive,
It wouldn't be the same. Suddenly the air was filled with strange and sweet perfume. Light that came from everywhere drove shadows from the room. Jesus stood before us with his arms held open wide. And I fell on my knees, just clung to him and cried. Jesus raised him to his feet and looked into his eyes. Love was shining out from him like sunlight from the skies. My guilt and my confusion disappeared in sweet release. Every fear I ever had just melted into peace. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive, he's alive, he's alive and I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide. He's alive.
He's alive. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Disciples, come on in.
All the disciples, come on in. He's alive.
I have to apologize. We really went over. We didn't think we were this late. But I want to thank these guys who put this together in what, less than 24 hours? Yeah. They did a great job.